When our kids at the Friendship Center would get frustrated or not, be lazy or whatever, we'd make them stand up and do some yoga or the whip and the nae-nae. So you can choose which you would like to do. Oh, York, please don't tell me you don't know what the whip and the nae-nae is. Okay, come on. Now, that's old. That is old. Yeah, if you don't know and you're going back here, you better you need to Google some dances. Okay. All right, so, I'm like super hot right there. Okay, so let's pick up on some culture where we were, some hidden rules, but I um, was reminded that I forgot a couple things, actually, and I told you that I would. And so when we took that test, Could You Survive in Poverty, I forgot to mention to you that the test for middle class would say things like, I know how to get a credit card, I know how to open up a bank account, I know how to sign my kids up for Little League. And we would all say, check, 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 right? And then the wealthy class says things like, do what? Right, yeah. Well, the wealthy class says things like, my favorite restaurant's in another country, I have my own Learjet. So all those things. Some people might check that in this room, I'm not sure. But the fact that he said something, my butler does it, and everyone snickered and laughed, that's how people in poverty feel about middle class people. There's a lot of little snickering that goes on because we feel that way about the wealthy class. We're like, whatever, let your butler do it. When if we had a butler, we'd be like, oh yes, thank you, love you so much, right? So we just have these kind of judgments about each other, and I failed to mention that for whatever reason. And also, if I didn't mention it earlier, of course we know that addiction, drugs, alcohol, shopping, gambling, all those things cross over all those classes, right? But the thing about poverty is that we can see it clearer. If someone is an addict, we see it clearer because they go through their resources quicker. Whereas someone who's middle class or wealthy class might have an addiction, but they still have a couch to sleep on or somebody to support them, where they're not completely out on the street. So sometimes and maybe eventually they get there, but sometimes we see it quicker with someone living in poverty. And so we know that crosses all class lines. Okay, so let's get back to the hidden rules. We talked about money. We did talk about personality. Let's talk about that. Because that's just one of the best ones. Okay, people in poverty value, as a culture, personality. It is, if you have the ability to tell a funny story, if you are a joker, if you have a gregarious personality, you are valued and you get status in a community where you can't get status for what you drive or where you went to school or where you work. And so personality is highly valued because it is a form of entertainment. Okay, so John and I. Some of you may not agree with this morning, but I'm a pretty funny person. But my husband is really funny. He can do like all these impressions. He's just like a total weirdo circus act, And so we would go to people's houses, and we would be there till 1, 2 in the morning, and we would tell stories and crack each other up. They would tell us hilarious stories. Stories my daughter still to this day will act out of stories people in the neighborhood would tell us. And we would leave there, and we would have had the best time. We got to know each other. We had great food and great fellowship, and it cost us nothing. And so the ability to entertain with your personality is status. And so what does that mean for you? If someone comes in here or into your agency, or you're in a community where people are at risk or vulnerable, and someone's telling you a story, be entertained. Even if it's not your cup of tea, be entertained. Laugh where you're supposed to laugh. And utilize that personality, because people in poverty tend to be very oral in their traditions, very, very much storytelling, and they want their story to be heard, just like you and I. We want to tell people who we are. We want to talk about ourselves sometimes or what we've gone through or what our story is. But people in poverty tend to do it more in an entertaining fashion. It might be a little loud for you, or it might be a little much for you, but let them have that. The other side of that is if you have children start coming to your church from communities that are impacted by poverty, they are going to want to be the one in charge and to tell the stories and to be funny. And they're going to seek that attention. And when we first came, we were like, we had some mission teams come up. And they're like, everybody needs to line up and show respect. And everybody's just sit down in this circle and, hands folded, and I'm the one speaking. I was like, yeah, you're not going to last very long this week if you don't chill and you don't let these kids be a little bit funny and have a little bit of say because they're fighting for status. Just like any middle class or wealthy class kid comes in wearing whatever clothes or talks about whatever they did that weekend, people in poverty are in the same boat. And so use it to your advantage. If they're super gregarious, have them be a greeter. Use those strengths. I guarantee it'll be like the most fun you've ever had because they're hysterical, they're hilarious, and it's so much fun. And you got to give people room for that. Okay. So personality is really valued. Okay, and the other flip side of that is, and I don't want to step on anyone's toes, I probably already have, so I guess I should just go ahead and do it. But if you are a person that's more introverted, the older I get, the more introverted I am, and, I just want to be by myself. I get it. But if you are a little bit shy and maybe you are the one that leads an outing into a community, or you're the greeter at a thing where people in poverty are, maybe you want to switch places where maybe you're more the listener, or you're the one who is building one-on-one relationships. Because whoever is the front person needs to be your most outgoing, gregarious person, because it speaks to their culture. And they will really appreciate that if someone has good personality and has great stories. And I myself walk into the men's bathroom on like a daily basis in public, and so I have many humiliating stories in my own life, and so I was willing to be vulnerable and share very embarrassing things for 20 years because it built rapport really quickly, and because I have a plethora of them. So I was never at a loss for a story about humiliating myself, but it was always a time where I could tell a story, and that brought rapport. And so that's the same with Scripture. If you're going to do a Bible study in a vulnerable community, we did a gazillion Bible studies in our 20 years on the field, and we always started with stories, and we always told stories from Scripture. We didn't tackle concepts. Not that people aren't smart enough to get concepts, but like the idea of holiness or sanctification or whatever it might be, we told the stories from Scripture about people and their life, and that connected. And then maybe we went into an ideology about sanctification or whatever. But we always started with stories. So that's a little life hack for you, if I can sound like a millennial for a second. Okay. So my daughter's all about life hacks. I'm like, legit, just do what you're supposed to do and, quit with the life hacks. Okay, so time we talked about quickly. Is it present? Middle class is future-oriented. And people in the wealthy class are considered what's most important for them is the past and traditions, right? And so time right now is present for those living in poverty. Okay, education in poverty is really, honestly, these are generalizations, if I need to say that again, but education in poverty is really seen as a babysitter, okay? It's something that you go into, you get breakfast and lunch, and you get out of my hair so I can take care of the baby and the other kids. And so it's not really seen like it is in middle class. It's like, if you don't go to school, what are you going to do, right? I mean, it's a means to an end. It's a way to get somewhere. And in poverty, it's really just a babysitter. It's just something to fulfill the time. And let's stop for a second and talk about gender roles in poverty. They're still very stuck and very traditional globally. Women in poverty have a very specific role, and girls in poverty have a very specific role. And so there might be a time where you start to get to know a family and the mom has to go to work and she doesn't have any child care, and so that fifth grader or fourth grader stays home from school to watch the baby so the mom can go to work out of survival, but then that girl doesn't get the schooling that she needs. Very rarely is it the boy to stay home. And that's what we saw a lot at the center. So at the center, we had to say, we got 7th through 12th graders coming on Monday. If you have to bring your baby sibling, if it's you can't come or bring a baby sibling, bring the baby sibling. And so I'm holding a baby, doing a Bible study with 12th graders, and that's just what you do, because otherwise that girl won't get to come. And then she will grow up in a few years and have her baby without her education. And so we wanted to model that, no, we want more for you than just to have a baby and not to have an education. And so you got to make space for that in your ministries. You got to make space for that. So let's talk about that for a second. The role of woman in poverty is, and this is for status, okay? So the role of woman, the thing to shoot for, the kind of woman to be, is to be victim, is to be a martyr or rescuer, okay? And within that, martyr is this real victim kind of narrative. So martyr, rescuer. And here's how that plays out. My child got in trouble at school. I'm going to go down there to that school. I know it was that teacher. That teacher has it out for him. And he's never done anything in his whole life. And it's the teacher. The teacher's failing him. So the mom swoops in, rescues the child from their consequence of something they 100% did, right? And so that child gets used to mom coming in, being rescuer. And then everyone in the community knows she went down there. She handled her business. She's got status. Child doesn't learn anything through that process. That happened all the time to us. Martyr is, I know that he beats me, but he's getting out of jail soon, and when he gets out, I will be here for him. No middle-class woman is sticking it out with a man who beats them, waiting for him to come home from prison, and the whole community says, you're a real strong woman. You're really loyal. No. If your husband goes away to prison and you're middle class, you say, oh, he's been gone for a while at a job. He's been on sabbatical. I don't know what you say, but you don't say he's been in prison. That is not a cultural thing that we do. And so people in poverty get status from rescuing and being a martyr. When you have relationships with women in poverty that are deep and meaningful and mutual, you can speak truth into this, that's not the abundant life. God's not calling us to rescue anyone or to be a martyr. He's calling us to live out the call that he has in our life. Role of man, very rigid, lover, fighter. So you come into town, you hook up with someone, you love them, you get into a fight, and you generally flee. Those are what's status for a man. If a man can physically defend himself and he has multiple partners, he has status. Generalizations, okay? We knew a lot of great men in the community that we served, but that was status. Even so much it was status that my husband John, when we had our baby, he carried her in like a little papoose thing, and he'd carry her and walk around the neighborhood and talk to people, and the men in the neighborhood were just like, bro, what are you doing? None of them carried their babies, and the woman always did all of that. And whenever the children had issue or the youth had issue, they would come to John and for guidance or wisdom. And so he was very nurturing. Middle-class women want a husband who is nurturing. That's what we're looking for, right? And so it's so different in poverty. So even John was carrying our baby through the neighborhood one time, and somebody offered him a beer, and they said, hey, man, we're doing tattoos up here if you want one. He was like, I'm good. Count my baby, walking through the neighborhood, and not really the time for a tattoo, a homemade tattoo at that. But then they're like, man, you're a baby man, and so that's always what I teased him about, that he was a baby man. But it was this idea that you're not a real man because you're not fighting and you're not hooking up, you don't have multiple partners, and you care for your child and you're nurturing. It's just very different from middle class. Like, if he started a fight, I'd be like, you done. I don't want to be with someone who starts a fight. So there's just differences in that. And so there's not a lot of room for nurturing in this kind of rigid role for man. And if you think about your congregation and how you're singing songs, it's very nurturing, it's warm, it's friendship, it's community. Sometimes it's hard for men in poverty to relate to a real nurturing environment. And so maybe go easy with some of that and just take notice of it. Okay, men and women, we talked about that. Usually families in poverty are matriarchal, and this gentleman hit on a big thing at the very beginning that they tend to be, the women are the ones in charge because the men are absent, and there's no shared, mutuality there. And so grandma is really the one that's been, in my experience for 20 years, the one in charge because mom's locked up. So many of our kids, their mom was locked up and their dad. And I'll be honest with you, something happens to your identity when your mom's locked up. That doesn't happen when your dad's locked up. There's just a different set of shame there. And we saw that for many, many years. But grandma's in charge. Grandma's 80 plus. She's frying everything because that's what grandmas do. And she doesn't know where anyone's at. And so everybody's running the streets. Uh, she knows everything in the neighborhood, yeah. Everybody knows everything in the neighborhood. If you go into a community that's at risk and you think people are watching you, it's because they are watching you. And I know people saw me pull up every day for 20 years. People watch me pull my car up, because that's safety and security. They have to be hyper aware of what's coming, what's going, who's in their neighborhood, who's not. And I'm kind of like that myself. I'm like, there was a lady throwing newspapers in my neighborhood. I called the police on her this week because I'd never seen her before. I'm like, there is a lady outside my door. And they're like, that's the newspaper lady. So she looks suspicious. And I didn't see her throw one thing, or else I would have put two and two together. But anyway, she was just parked really crazy. And I'm all about neighborhood watch. Okay. Without bias or judgment. All right. So, okay. Let's talk about language. We'll park here for a minute, and if this is a little bit of a long one. So language in poverty is casual. What you would do among friends. It's a casual register. So, hey, how you doing? What's up? Lots of slang, if they want it to be. But it's like what you and I would do if we were really good friends. In middle class, we have a formal register, especially at work. Hello, how are you doing? I'm well, how are you? All those things. And so what happens is if someone in poverty decides that they're going to work or live in a neighborhood or come to a church that is middle class, and they walk in and they're like, what's up? And you're like, here we say, hello, how are you doing? There's like this weird disconnect. And so if someone's visiting from your church and you know that maybe they are from an at-risk community, you might just want to help them, guide them through that, talk them through that, and kind of negotiate that for them as they walk through the church or through your agency or whatever it might be. Also about language is that in poverty, there are fewer words spoken, okay? Not because they're ignorant or they cannot handle middle-class vocabulary. It's because tyranny of the moment, okay? This idea that everything is chaotic. So let's say you're on a bus with me. Does York have public transit? Any bus? Oh, wow, that's hard, isn't it? Uber? Any Uber drivers? Okay, that's good. That helps, right? That helps with some of your community. So let's say you're on a bus. Just pretend, okay, York, that you're on a bus. And you are sitting across from me, and I'm a middle-class person, and I have my toddler, and I say, Maggie, you need to sit down. You're gonna fall and get hurt. You can sit in my lap, or you can sit in the chair, but you need to sit down. You're on a bus with someone in poverty, and their toddler is standing next to you, and they say, get down. And you say, oh my gosh, and you're like, social services, right? So you say, that person doesn't love their child. Oh my gosh, it's the worst mom I've ever seen. And you just start judging, right? That's what I would do. Until I figured out that fewer words are spoken. For generations, fewer words are spoken. And my child, what did she learn? Besides words, her vocabulary was expounded because I used a lot of words. But what else did she learn? Consequence. She also learned why. And she learned choices, right? If you only hear, get down, you only learn, I better listen to my mom. And mom in poverty, she's golden. She's top. She's the boss. And she is the keeper of the soul. She determines if you are forgiven, what your penance will be, and it's not right till it's right with her. And I will tell you that in poverty, there's a saintlyhood thing that goes on with moms, and so many of the moms that I met did not even remotely deserve it. And there was this denial and this minimizing that went on. And in relationship, you can acknowledge it. And they're like, well, my mom, she's so great. And I'm like, really? Are we talking about the same mom? Because she's horrific, right? I've called social services on your mom, right? So, but just know going in that there is this very protected place of mom. And mom's important to get to know as an agency, as a church, working with children. You want to get to know that mom. But also know there's this weird place that mom lives in that's not really based in reality, and it doesn't really help if people are trying to move past their parents' addiction or they're trying to move past the abuse. It's not helpful to be like, my mom's a saint, because you can't acknowledge what you don't acknowledge, right? And so just know that. But the idea that there are fewer words spoken. So if someone comes in and they just start him-hawing around and they just say fewer words, don't assume they're dumb or they're ignorant. But because of tyranny of the moment, there's less time for words. In our moms group, the moms would say to me when Maggie was a toddler, you talk to her way too much. You give way too many instructions. And they said, if my child does something, I'm like, in the corner, hold cans. And I was like, what do you mean, hold cans? And they're like, yeah, that's what my mom did and her mom did. If you did something wrong, you went in the corner and you held cans for as long as you could. And I'm like, what are they learning from this, right? In the moms group, we talked extremely openly with each other. And I said, well, so I told them what I'm getting ready to tell you. When a middle class kindergartner goes to first grade, they know 40 million words, expressions, phrases. When a child from poverty goes to kindergarten, they know 10 million words, expressions, and phrases. And when I told my mom's group that, I'm like, you may think I talked to Maggie to death, but those cans, they're not teaching her anything, your children anything, right? I mean, we're doing timeout, we're doing other things. You do what you want to do, but cans in a corner, there's no words, your child's going to be behind. And those moms were like, my child will not be behind some middle-class kid, right? So they had this one mom, Nicole, I talked about already. She's a good friend, have permission to tell her story. She actually loves it that I talk about her. She'll put it on Facebook, yeah, pump me up, girl. But she has 3 little ones. She's strapped them in the back. They're at a stop sign. She's like, look at the stop sign. It's red. It's white. It says S-T-O-P. Look at the bird. I mean, she's just boom, 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 boom. And every one of her kids read before kindergarten. Because we know as middle-class people, words are important to our child's development. They're important to the language, how they can express themselves, how they come across, how they're judged. And so there's fewer words spoken because tyranny of the moment is so intense, it's so chaotic. Come on, get your stuff, let's go. There's just no time to be nurturing. There's no time to be warm and fuzzy and explain things, right? That's a gift of the middle class. And so don't judge that when a mom does that or you see someone kind of be harsh on their kid. It's generations. The other piece of that harshness is this very overwhelming driving force of survival. Because if I talk to you and you have a timeout, that's weak. But if you stand in the corner and hold cans, you're going to make it on the street, right? So there's this survival piece. Their kid falls down, get up. My child falls down right now today. She's 13. Oh, my gosh, are you okay? Because I'm a freak, right? And so I was just like, what happened? Are you okay? There's just this nurturing piece that I have freedom to do because my life is stable, and I can be a nurturing mom, and I can be an overprotective mom. But if you don't have time for it, and you know life's going to be hard for your kid, and they fall, you say, get up and dust off. Let's go. There's just not this time of nurturing because that's weak. And that's vulnerable. And if you are poor and you've been poor for generations, weak and vulnerable is not acceptable. And that's a tough place. If you can't be weak and vulnerable, what does that mean for your walk with the Lord? Right? I mean, that's the place of vulnerability is when we say we receive what Christ has done for us. So that's a real stronghold. Okay. Let's talk about humor for a second because I just want you to know this. Humor in middle class is usually about situations. It's a funny story or it's something that's happened to you. We have situation comedies that we watch on TV. People in poverty, what they think is funny is picking on people in a harsh way and sex. They make a lot of jokes that are sexual in front of their kids. Nothing's off bound. There's no boundaries. There's nothing that says, oh, there's little ears in the room. There's none of that in poverty. And as you get to know that, People hear things maybe they shouldn't hear. They see things they shouldn't see. And it's just, this is our life. This is the way we live it. And so just know that going in. But if they start picking on you, you wear that as a badge because you're in. When I was pregnant with my daughter, there was a lot going on. I was really big, and you thought, oh, you're carrying, quads. But I just put on a ton of weight, and she was a big baby. And the women in my community that were Hispanic started calling me gordita. That's little fat girl. And I was like, white girls don't like gordita. But in their culture, that's like a loving term. Like, oh, you're fat, you're pregnant, it's great. And I'm like, oh, I don't want, And then they called me gordita after the baby was born. I'm like, okay, we gonna scrap. I've been in the hood long enough. I can scrap with y'all. So, so they picked on me a little bit, and they thought it was loving and enduring and fun. And I didn't particularly appreciate it, but I got over it. But so if you get picked on, you're going in somebody's house and they say something about you, just take it. One thing, though, that I never let happen, and I probably went against culture, was that parents would come in and say, well, this is my dumb one. This is my one that likes to get in trouble all the time. And this is my one that won't ever listen, and da-da-da. And every time that kind of happened, I would say, well, that's crazy, because here, she does this and this, and she's always working on her homework. I would always try to lift them up. There's nothing more shaming than a parent saying something to a child in front of another adult. And so I know that that's a part of their culture, but I couldn't take it. I couldn't stand it. So I tried to lift them up in those moments. Okay. Other thing about culture, hidden rule, is that there's a lot of background noise in homes of people in poverty. So if you have the wonderful privilege of going in someone's home in poverty, just know the TV's going to be on, probably the radio's going to be on, someone's going to be watching something on their phone, a baby's going to be crying, a dog's going to be barking, and they will hear what you say. They just can. I did this for an agency in Des Moines, social work, a bunch of social workers, and they were like, well, I like to go in and say, can we turn the TV off, and can you put that baby somewhere else? And I was like, okay. How successful are you? Because that's their home, and it's just a lot of noise, and they can tune you in. You may not think anyone can hear what you're saying, but they can, and the more you're in someone's home like that, you'll get used to kind of that vibe. Now, as a middle-class person, if you come to my home, I turn the TV off. If my baby's crying, I get it a passy. I figure something out to quiet the baby so I can focus on you. It's just not that way. It's just more chaotic. There's not a lot of organization in the home. There might not be a dining room table. There might not be a kitchen table. There might not be beds. There might be a mattress on the floor. And so it's just a different kind of chaotic environment. Okay, so those are some of the hidden rules. We talked a little bit about the driving forces, but I want to hit it again. So relationships, driving force, not just a little important, the most important. Survival, every decision someone makes in poverty, it goes back to this need to survive. And if it frustrates you, every time I got real frustrated in Des Moines, which was weekly, I always had to remind myself, or John had to remind me, it's about survival. It's about survival. People's choices are about survival. And so keep that in mind. Relationships, survival, and then the need to entertain. Okay? So you go into someone's home, and there's a big screen TV that you could see from space. And you say, but you don't have gas to put in your car, or you can't get to work, or you can't do this or that, but you can have that big screen TV. The need to entertain supersedes any other needs. Why do you think that's so? Escape. And there's another reason. Status. So let's say that Alvin has the big screen TV. He lives in our neighborhood, and he's paying for the fight. Everyone's coming to his house. He's the big man that night because he's paying for the fight. We can all see it. They can see it from satellites. And so he gets status in a place where he can't get status anywhere else. He can't get status, hey, guys, at work today, I made a great deal. He can't do any of that. He can't do all that status stuff that we all do, whether we admit it or not, middle class, wealthy class. We all want status. People in poverty want that too. And so it's from the form of entertainment, because if we can leave his house not thinking about all the tyranny of the moment, all the chaos, all the problems, he has really come through for us with that big screen TV. Same with like stereo systems. You ever pull up next to someone and you're like, I think my heart is beating out of my chest? Maggie used to go, no, not the thump, because in our neighborhood it was always, it thumped her chest. That is a form of entertainment. Hey, I spent all this money, like it's a ridiculous amount of money, by the way. I spent all this money on my car's entertainment system, and I'm driving around the neighborhood. You're like, where are they going? They're going in circles. We had one guy just circle through the neighborhood, and he was literally entertaining the whole neighborhood because he wanted you to know he could. And he afforded it, and he got it. Who knows how or why, but that's what he did. And so he was getting status constantly by doing that. So sometimes we see someone in our car and the everything's going, the bass is going, and we're like, oh my gosh, criminals. We roll up our window, we lock our door. We're like, where's my purse? We freak out. It's really not that. It is entertainment, okay? Now, I don't know if they're criminals or not, but you go to the mall and there's 100 million middle-class people there that could do something to you. So we just have these weird judgments in our mind about things, and it just goes back to entertainment. So he's trying to entertain you. I tell groups all the time, don't really do this, but I tell groups all the time, roll down the window and thanks for entertaining me. You will get a beat down, okay? Don't do that. And you'll deserve it. You'll deserve it. Okay. Yeah, we always say that. We always joke around about that. But really that's what they're doing at the essence. They may not even say that's what they're doing, but they just know culture passed down. That's what you do. That's how you entertain. And then sometimes it's the TV, sometimes it's the gaming system, sometimes it's things that you and I deem, well, that's really expensive. I don't even have that in my house, right? We have one TV, it's really small. We have no gaming systems. We have no computer in our home. My daughter doesn't have a cell phone. But that's because of other issues. But, we just don't do that. So there's a lot of reasons for a lot of things. So just don't judge it. Okay. I want you to draw the floor plan of your house and share it with the person next to you. Don't go like Architectural Digest on me. Just keep it real easy. Keep it real easy. Once you get that drawn, just go ahead and share it with someone next to you. Yeah, don't share it with someone that has the same house, okay? I think they know the floor plan. Okay, somebody share with me from middle class, a middle class um, floor plan. Somebody want to share with me their floor plan? She's like, don't put me on the spot. Yeah, will you just tell me what it is? Garage? Garage. Okay. All right. Typical, right? Middle class, an eat-in kitchen. Can you eat in the kitchen? Okay. All right. Anybody else have anything different? Playroom. Anybody got like a she shack? Or you got a man cave? That's so middle class, y'all. Okay, don't tell anybody in poverty you got a she shack. Okay, you will get a beat down. All right. Okay. So, all right, let's do a house in poverty. We're talking probably a square, right? Okay. So what's in this square? Right. One bathroom. How many bedrooms generally? Two. Right. Okay. Bedroom. Okay. So let's say that there's a family of 8. Okay. And let me just say, too, we didn't say this in the beginning because you guys didn't say it, but this idea of having babies for a welfare check, okay, that's not real. All right, so just that's not a real thing. You don't. Nobody has babies for welfare checks. That's an old bias, and it's not even a real thing anymore. But now that you know driving force is relationship, people are possessions. Okay, that's some of that piece. But let's say there's 8 people, and the mom and dad sleep in here with 2 kids, let's say. And do what? Yeah, the baby's in the bed. And then 2 sleep over here, 1 or 2 sleep over here, and then one's left to sleep out here. He can sleep in the living room, or he can sleep in the bathtub. When do you go to sleep if you sleep in the living room? And somebody works the night shift, so you're getting interrupted constantly. What if your house, there's a lot going on in your house? Maybe that shouldn't be going on. When are you going to sleep in that living room? Never. You're 4th grade, you go to school, and they can't understand why you keep falling asleep, why you don't do your work, why you can't focus. You come to church and you're doing Awana or something. You didn't bring your book. You don't know the scripture. You don't know nothing, and you just want to be here. You're just tired. There's implications for living in poverty that go beyond kind of what we think. And sometimes we see people in poverty standing in groups. When we first got to the center, we worked with a lot of Hispanic, African American, people from Africa, people from Laosha. There was all these cool, it was such a diverse place. But the Hispanic men would stand outside and gather. And when I first got there, I was like, oh, they're selling drugs. They're gang members, right? Some of them were gang members, but I didn't learn that till later. But I'm like, they're gang members, they're plotting something. And then I learned their house is so crowded with so many babies, and their gender or their group, their culture, the men like to visit with each other and the women like to visit with each other, and there's no space in the house for that, so they would gather on the street to visit. But my dumb middle class Caucasian mind said, well, that looks suspicious. I'm just going to say that's suspicious, right? And I'm going to avoid those guys. But I just need to understand culture so that my understanding could go up and my judgment could go down. And so when you have a child in your Sunday school class or a child that comes to your agency or an after-school program or is in your VBS and they just fall asleep, we just let them sleep, you know? We just let them sleep. We had a same kid every Wednesday. I don't know why Tuesday he didn't fall asleep, but every Wednesday he would fall asleep. And so we would just let him fall asleep, and we'd wake him up for dinner because we had a community meal. Because his house there were 12, 15 people in that house, and he was tired. And, you know, your brain's not going to fully develop if you don't get the sleep that you need. So there's implications for even the size of the house. And if I am annoyed by my family, I can go in mini rooms where they are not. I can go to, you know, men go to their man cave or they do, you know, they go watch whatever, I don't know what men do, watch sports, I have no idea. They go do whatever they do and they get a break. But in poverty, there's no breaks and there's no place to go. So sometimes people sit in their car. Sometimes people are gathered on the street. but there's not a lot of breaks, especially for the women. And I'll tell you this too, if you are interested in, retweaking your benevolence or what it means to define benevolence, I'll be glad to help you with that, because the idea of walking alongside someone with support and encouragement is such a better plan than paying someone's rent. Because women in poverty, there is no child care babysitter time. Like, it's very random and very few. And if it is, it's a bartering system. I'll do your nails if you watch my baby today. And, someone comes in here with nails and hair, and you think, well, why are they getting this food? They don't need this food. But they probably bartered. They probably watched somebody's really bratty kid for like 4 hours to get their nails done. So just keep in mind there's that system. But also, if you can come alongside and say, oh my gosh, why don't you and your boyfriend go out to eat and we'll watch your kids? That's a beautiful gift to give to someone. Because middle class people, we have babysitters and we do all these things, but other people, other cultures don't do that. In poverty, they don't have that luxury, and they might not have the support system. Okay, so there's implications for even the floor plan. I wanted to make sure that you got that. Okay,